Picture this. Two identical twins, separated by thousands of miles, suddenly clutch their chest at the exact same moment. One has just suffered a heart attack. The other felt it happen. In laboratory conditions, researchers have documented cases where stimulating one twin's brain waves automatically triggered identical patterns in their sibling's mind, despite complete physical separation. No communication, no contact, just instantaneous connection across space itself. What if the deepest bonds we share with others don't actually end when distance or even death separates us? What if quantum mechanics is revealing that connection itself might be woven into the very fabric of reality? Welcome to a journey through one of the most intriguing intersections of modern physics and human experience. I'm here to guide you gently through ideas that might reshape how you think about love, loss, and the invisible threads that seem to connect us across time and space. Before we begin, let me say that what we're exploring today ventures into territory where established science meets speculation, where proven quantum phenomena brush against the deepest mysteries of consciousness itself. Tonight, we're going to explore what some researchers are calling Quantum Synchronicity Theory, the possibility that meaningful coincidences and persistent feelings of connection might have roots in the strange, non-local correlations that quantum physics has revealed at the heart of reality. We'll examine recent groundbreaking research suggesting that the human brain might operate as a quantum system, generating entangled particles that could theoretically link conscious minds across any distance. And we'll consider whether Carl Jung's concept of synchronicity, those moments when the universe seems to speak directly to us through meaningful coincidences, might actually be glimpses of quantum entanglement operating at the scale of human experience. This is a speculative idea, not proven scientific fact, but the research we'll explore tonight is real, published in peer-reviewed journals, and opening doors to questions that could fundamentally change how we understand consciousness, connection, and what it means to be human. So settle in, perhaps dim the lights, and let's begin this contemplative exploration of whether the people we've loved, lost, or left behind might still be connected to us in ways that transcend everything we thought we knew about the boundaries between minds. For decades, neuroscientists have approached the brain as an elegant biological computer, neurons firing in classical patterns to create the symphony of consciousness. But recent research from Shanghai University has revealed something extraordinary, hidden in the fatty tissue that surrounds our nerve fibers, something that suggests our brains might be far more mysterious than we ever imagined. The discovery centers on myelin, that pale, fatty substance that wraps around nerve axons like insulation around electrical wire. Scientists have long understood myelin's role in speeding up neural signals, but new mathematical models reveal that these cylindrical sheaths might serve an entirely different purpose. They appear to create the perfect environment for generating quantum entanglement within living brain tissue. When millions of neurons fire simultaneously during active consciousness, the research suggests the vibrational modes within myelin sheaths begin to emit infrared photons. But these aren't ordinary photons. They emerge in pairs, quantum mechanically entangled, sharing an invisible connection that Einstein famously called spooky action at a distance. The implications are staggering. If confirmed, this would mean that every moment of conscious awareness generates quantum resources within your brain, resources that could theoretically connect to similar quantum states anywhere in the universe. The mathematical models show that carbon-hydrogen bonds embedded in myelin tissue emit what researchers call cascade radiation, when energized by neural activity. The abundance of these molecular bonds throughout the nervous system could serve as a vast network of quantum entanglement sources operating at body temperature without the exotic conditions typically required for quantum effects. But here's what makes this discovery even more remarkable. The entanglement appears to be directly linked to consciousness itself. In studies monitoring brain activity, researchers found that these quantum signatures only appeared during states of conscious awareness. When subjects fell asleep during brain scans, the entanglement signals faded and disappeared entirely. It's as if consciousness and quantum entanglement are intimately connected at the most fundamental level of neural processing. This represents a profound shift in how we might understand the brain. Rather than a classical biological computer processing information through purely chemical and electrical signals, we might possess quantum minds generating entangled particles with every conscious thought. The brain may not operate according to classical physics at all, but rather as a sophisticated quantum system whose operations we're only beginning to glimpse. What does this mean for human connection? If our brains generate entangled quantum states during conscious awareness, and if quantum entanglement truly transcends distance and time as physics suggests, then the boundaries between minds might be far more porous than we've ever imagined. This is speculative territory, but it opens possibilities that could revolutionize our understanding of consciousness, connection, and the nature of subjective experience itself. The idea that consciousness might operate through quantum mechanisms isn't entirely new. In the early 20th century, two brilliant minds, physicist Wolfgang Pauli and psychologist Carl Jung, began a remarkable collaboration that would anticipate many of the questions we're exploring today. Their correspondence, spanning nearly a decade, produced what scholars now call the Pauli-Jung conjecture, a radical proposal that quantum mechanics and psychology might be describing different aspects of the same underlying reality. Jung had been studying what he called synchronicity, those meaningful coincidences that seem to carry significance far beyond statistical probability. A patient dreams of a golden scarab beetle, and at that exact moment, a similar insect taps against Jung's office window. A person thinks intensely about someone they haven't contacted in years, only to receive an unexpected call from them moments later. Jung believed these weren't random coincidences, but glimpses of a deeper order connecting mind and matter, consciousness and cosmos. Pauli, who would later win the Nobel Prize for his work in quantum mechanics, found Jung's ideas fascinating because they seemed to mirror phenomena he was observing in the quantum realm. Quantum entanglement showed that particles could maintain instantaneous correlations across any distance, their states intertwined in ways that defied classical notions of locality and causation. The measurement of one particle would instantly influence its entangled partner, regardless of the space between them. What captivated both men was the possibility that quantum non-locality, the stranger causal correlations between entangled particles, might represent the physical mechanism underlying synchronicity. Jung had proposed that meaningful coincidences arose from what he called the collective unconscious, a shared psychic substrate connecting all human minds. Pauli suggested this might operate through quantum processes that linked consciousness to the fundamental structure of reality itself. Their collaboration produced a radical insight. Perhaps the currency of these mysterious connections isn't quantitative statistics, as in classical physics, but qualitative meaning. Jung and Pauli proposed that consciousness and matter might be unified aspects of a deeper reality, one where the boundaries between observer and observed, mind and world, become permeable through quantum mechanical processes. This wasn't merely philosophical speculation. Pauli brought rigorous scientific thinking to Jung's observations, while Jung provided detailed phenomenological analysis of how these causal connections manifested in human experience. Together, they suggested that consciousness might not be confined to individual brains, but could participate in quantum field phenomena that transcended the usual boundaries of space and time. Modern quantum physics has only deepened these mysteries. We now know that quantum entanglement is not just a laboratory curiosity, but a fundamental feature of reality. Experiments have demonstrated quantum correlations across hundreds of kilometers, and theoretical work suggests these connections could extend across cosmic distances without any degradation in their strength or immediacy. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest that consciousness itself might play a fundamental role in the transition from quantum possibilities to classical reality. While this remains highly controversial and unproven, the questions Jung and Pauli raised continue to intrigue researchers at the intersection of physics and consciousness studies. Their work reminds us that the deepest mysteries of human experience, those moments when we sense invisible connections to others or to the world itself, might not be mere imagination or wishful thinking. They might be glimpses of quantum mechanical processes operating at scales we're only beginning to understand, connecting minds through mechanisms that transcend our classical understanding of separation and individuality. While Jung and Pauli theorized about quantum connections between minds, modern researchers have begun testing these ideas under controlled laboratory conditions. The results are both fascinating and puzzling, suggesting that human consciousness might indeed participate in phenomena that classical neuroscience struggles to explain. One of the most intriguing studies involved 106 pairs of identical twins, randomly assigned to control and experimental groups in a carefully designed quantum experiment. Using IBM's Brisbane quantum computer, researchers created two distinct quantum circuits, one with entangled qubits for the experimental group and one with non-entangled qubits for the control group. The twins, separated in space, participated in learning experiments while their brain activity was monitored through 3D electroencephalography. The findings were remarkable. In the experimental group, where quantum entanglement was present in the stimulus configurations, the entangled qubits explained 13.5% of the variance in learning accuracy between twin pairs. Even more striking, researchers observed what they called a Q coefficient, capturing up to a 31.6% increase in variance across twin responses when quantum entanglement was involved. Biomarkers associated with neuroplasticity showed a 26.2% increase in cognitive performance under entangled conditions. This suggests that quantum entanglement might actually enhance conscious experience and facilitate more efficient learning and cognitive processing. The study provides statistical evidence that quantum mechanical processes could influence consciousness at measurable biophysical levels. However, it's crucial to note that this remains preliminary research requiring extensive replication and validation. Even more intriguing are historical cases of apparent telepathic connection between identical twins. In the 1960s, researchers documented instances where stimulating one twin's brainwaves automatically triggered identical patterns in their sibling, despite complete physical separation. The phenomenon, which they termed extrasensory induction, occurred in only 2 out of 15 twin pairs tested, but when present, it was remarkably consistent across multiple testing sessions. The researchers noted that extrasensory induction never occurred between unrelated subjects, only between genetically identical twins. This specificity suggests that shared genetic material might create some predisposition toward quantum mechanical connection, though the mechanism remains completely mysterious. It's worth emphasizing that these effects didn't appear in all twin pairs, raising questions about what factors might determine susceptibility to such phenomena. Recent experiments in quantum pseudo-telepathy have demonstrated that entangled particles can eliminate the need for classical communication between separated parties. In laboratory games, where coordination is required without information exchange, entangled systems can achieve perfect performance that would be impossible through classical means. While these experiments involve quantum systems rather than human consciousness, they demonstrate that quantum correlations can produce effects that closely resemble telepathic communication. The implications extend beyond twin studies to broader questions about human connection. If identical twins who originated as a single fertilized cell before dividing can maintain quantum correlations that influence conscious experience, what might this suggest about other forms of deep human bonding? Could intense emotional connections, shared experiences, or prolonged intimacy create similar quantum entanglements between minds? This remains highly speculative, but research in quantum biology is revealing that quantum effects are far more robust and widespread in living systems than previously thought. Quantum coherence helps explain the extraordinary efficiency of photosynthesis, and mounting evidence suggests that quantum processes might underlie navigation in migrating animals and possibly aspects of human sensory perception. The temperature objection to quantum effects in biological systems is also eroding. Recent studies show that quantum coherence can persist at body temperature for surprisingly long periods, thousands of times longer than early theoretical estimates predicted. The myelin biphoton research demonstrates entanglement surviving at normal human body temperature, while plant photosynthetic complexes maintain quantum coherence at room temperature. These findings don't prove that human consciousness operates through quantum entanglement, but they suggest that the biological world might be far more quantum mechanical than classical physics would predict. The possibility that deep human connections could involve quantum correlations between minds remains an open and fascinating question at the frontier of consciousness research. As we'll explore next, the theoretical foundations for such connections might be found in some of the most profound ideas about the nature of memory, inheritance, and the collective aspects of human consciousness that transcend individual minds. This exploration of quantum synchronicity theory continues to unfold mysteries that challenge our understanding of consciousness and connection. In our next segment, we'll delve deeper into how these quantum possibilities might manifest in everyday experience and examine the profound implications for how we understand love, loss, and the persistence of human bonds across time and space. What if memory isn't stored in your brain at all, but exists as a field that surrounds and permeates all of life? This radical possibility emerges from the work of biologist Rupert Sheldrake, whose theory of morphic resonance suggests that the patterns organizing living systems might be transmitted across time and space through a kind of non-local memory field. Sheldrake proposes that when any organism develops, learns, or behaves in a particular way, it contributes to what he calls a morphic field, an invisible organizing pattern that makes it easier for similar organisms to develop, learn, or behave in the same way. The more often a pattern is repeated, the stronger the field becomes, creating a kind of collective memory that transcends individual brains and bodies. Consider this. When laboratory rats in one location learn to navigate a new maze, rats of the same strain in laboratories around the world subsequently learn the same maze faster, even though they've had no contact with the original rats. This phenomenon, documented in multiple studies, suggests that learning creates a field effect that somehow influences similar organisms across space. The implications for human connection are profound. If morphic resonance operates in human consciousness, then every deep relationship, every moment of profound understanding between minds, every shared emotional experience might contribute to fields that make similar connections more probable. The bonds we form with others might literally reshape the invisible architecture of possibility for future connections. This isn't proven science, but speculative theory, yet it offers a compelling framework for understanding experiences that seem to transcend individual consciousness. When you walk into a room and immediately sense the emotional atmosphere, when you feel an inexplicable connection to a stranger, when you find yourself thinking of someone moments before they contact you, you might be encountering the edges of morphic fields created by countless similar experiences throughout human history. Sheldrake extends this idea to what he calls the collective memory of species. Just as individual organisms inherit genetic patterns, they might also inherit behavioral and cognitive patterns through morphic resonance. Human societies, he suggests, have memories transmitted through cultural rituals and shared practices that create resonance with those who performed the same activities in the past. When you participate in traditions, ceremonies, or even simple daily routines shared by countless others, you might be tuning into morphic fields that connect you to the accumulated experience of everyone who is engaged in similar practices. The comfort of familiar rituals, the sense of belonging in shared activities, the feeling that certain behaviours come naturally, all of these might reflect our participation in fields of collective memory. But perhaps most intriguingly, for our exploration of quantum synchronicity, morphic resonance might provide a mechanism through which quantum entanglements created in consciousness could propagate and persist across time. If deep emotional bonds generate quantum correlations between minds, and if these correlations contribute to morphic fields, then the connections we form with others might become part of a larger field that influences how consciousness organizes itself. This remains highly speculative, but it suggests that the boundaries between individual minds might be far more permeable than we typically assume. Your consciousness might not be confined to the neural networks in your skull, but could participate in fields that connect you to others across space and time. The people you've loved deeply, the relationships that have shaped you, the moments of profound connection you've experienced, all of these might contribute to morphic patterns that influence how consciousness manifests in the world. If morphic resonance operates as Sheldrake suggests, then Jung's concept of the collective unconscious finds a potential physical mechanism. The archetypal patterns, universal symbols, and shared psychological structures that Jung observed across cultures might arise from morphic fields created by the accumulated experience of human consciousness throughout history. This perspective transforms how we might understand persistent feelings of connection to others. When you sense the presence of someone who is physically absent, when you feel guided by the wisdom of those who came before you, when you experience uncanny synchronicities that seem meaningfully connected to your relationships, you might be encountering morphic resonance between your consciousness and fields created by deep emotional bonds. The theory suggests that love itself might be a creative force that literally shapes the structure of reality. Every act of genuine care, every moment of deep understanding, every experience of profound connection might contribute to fields that make love more probable, understanding more accessible, connection more natural. The relationships we form don't just matter for our individual happiness. They might participate in the ongoing evolution of consciousness itself. While neuroscientists have focused primarily on the brain as the seat of consciousness, recent research reveals that the heart generates the strongest electromagnetic field in the human body, producing electrical signals 100 times more powerful than the brain, and magnetic fields 5,000 times stronger. This isn't merely metaphorical. When we speak of heart-centered connection, there might be literal electromagnetic foundations to the bonds between human beings. The heart's electromagnetic field extends several feet beyond the body, creating an invisible sphere of influence that surrounds each person. This field fluctuates with emotional states, breathing patterns, and levels of coherence between heart rhythm and other physiological systems. When you're in states of appreciation, compassion, or love, the heart's field becomes more coherent and organized. During stress, fear, or frustration, the field becomes chaotic and fragmented. What's remarkable is that these electromagnetic fields can influence other people. Research has documented cases where one person's brainwaves synchronize to another person's heart rhythm when they're in close proximity. The heart's electromagnetic field appears to carry information about emotional states that can be detected, whether consciously or unconsciously, by others. This suggests a mechanism through which the feelings we hold in our hearts might literally reach out and touch others. When you think of someone with genuine love or appreciation, your heart's electromagnetic field shifts into more coherent patterns. If that person is sensitive to subtle electromagnetic changes, they might unconsciously detect this shift, potentially explaining those moments when someone contacts you just as you were thinking of them with particular warmth or intensity. The implications extend beyond momentary synchronicities to deeper questions about how human bonds form and persist. If our hearts generate measurable electromagnetic fields that carry emotional information, and if these fields can influence others across space, then the connections we feel with important people in our lives might have tangible, physical foundations. Consider the phenomenon of heart rate variability, the subtle variations in timing between heartbeats that reflect the dynamic balance of our autonomic nervous system. When people are in close emotional connection, their heart rate variability patterns often synchronize, creating a kind of physiological harmony that can be measured with sensitive instruments. This synchronization can occur even when people are not consciously aware of each other's emotional states. Some researchers suggest that the heart's electromagnetic field might serve as a communication channel between individuals, carrying information about emotional states, intentions, and levels of coherence or stress. While this remains speculative, it provides a potential bridge between the subjective experience of connection and the objective realm of measurable electromagnetic phenomena. The heart's field might also interact with quantum processes in ways we're only beginning to understand. If consciousness generates quantum entangled states, as recent research suggests, and if the heart's electromagnetic field influences neural processing, then coherent heart states might enhance the brain's capacity for quantum correlation with others. This isn't to suggest that positive emotions directly create quantum entanglement, which remains unproven, but rather that states of heart coherence might optimize the conditions under which quantum processes in consciousness could operate. The electromagnetic environment created by a coherent heart might provide a more stable foundation for the delicate quantum effects that some researchers believe underlie conscious experience. When you cultivate genuine appreciation, compassion, or love, you're not just changing your subjective emotional state, you're potentially altering the electromagnetic field that surrounds you and influences others. The quality of presence you bring to relationships might literally shape the energetic environment in which connection becomes possible. This perspective suggests that practices aimed at developing heart coherence, such as focused breathing, gratitude cultivation, or loving kindness meditation, might do more than improve individual well-being. They might enhance your capacity for meaningful connection with others by optimizing the electromagnetic conditions through which subtle communication between hearts and minds becomes possible. The research remains preliminary and requires much more investigation, but it points toward a vision of human connection that encompasses both the quantifiable realm of electromagnetic fields and the mysterious domain of quantum correlation. Your heart might serve as both a generator of coherent electromagnetic energy and a quantum antenna, capable of subtle communion with other hearts across space and time. At the molecular level, life reveals behaviors that challenge our understanding of how biological systems recognize and interact with each other. Intact, double-stranded DNA, the fundamental carrier of genetic information, has been observed to recognize similarities in other DNA strands without any physical contact or protein intermediaries. This recognition occurs between sequences of several hundred nucleotides in pure water with no other materials present that could mediate the interaction. The mechanism behind this recognition remains mysterious. DNA strands somehow identify complementary sequences and orient themselves for potential combination, suggesting a form of communication or guidance that operates below the threshold of conventional molecular interactions. Some researchers speculate that this behavior might involve quantum effects, though this remains highly theoretical and unproven. What makes this phenomenon particularly intriguing in the context of human connection is the possibility that genetic similarity might create predispositions for quantum, suggesting that identical twins who share identical DNA correlation between individuals. We've already explored research recognition operates through subtle quantum processes. This sometimes display apparent telepathic connections that don't occur between unrelated individuals. If DNA might provide a mechanism for understanding why genetic relatedness seems to correlate with instances that biological molecules might serve as carriers of consciousness remains speculative, but some researchers have proposed that DNA an of apparent extrasensory connection. The idea that other cellular structures involved in reproduction and development might participate in the organization of conscious experience. This doesn't mean that DNA thinks or feels, but rather that the information processing systems at the cellular level might interface with the quantum processes that some theories suggest underlie consciousness. Consider the implications. If quantum processes in consciousness can create correlations between minds, and if DNA recognition involves quantum mechanisms, then genetic similarity might enhance the probability of quantum entanglement between individuals. This could explain why families often report stronger intuitive connections, why twins sometimes display remarkable synchronicities, and why people with shared ancestry might feel inexplicable bonds even when meeting for the first time. This remains highly speculative territory, but it points toward a vision of connection that operates at multiple levels simultaneously, from the quantum correlations that might link conscious minds to the molecular recognition systems that enable cells to identify genetic similarity. The threads that bind us to others might be woven from both the subtle quantum fabric of consciousness and the more tangible molecular patterns encoded in our genetic material. Recent studies in quantum biology have revealed that quantum effects are far more prevalent in living systems than previously thought. Photosynthesis, the process by which plants convert sunlight into chemical energy, relies on quantum coherence to achieve its remarkable efficiency. Migrating animals appear to use quantum effects in specialized proteins to navigate by sensing Earth's magnetic field. These discoveries suggest that life has evolved to harness quantum phenomena for essential biological functions. If quantum effects are integral to life processes, then the possibility that consciousness itself involves quantum phenomena becomes less exotic and more plausible. The brain, as the most complex biological system we know, might naturally employ quantum processes for information integration, memory formation, and the generation of conscious experience. And if consciousness involves quantum effects, then quantum correlations between minds become a theoretical possibility rather than science fiction. The recognition behavior of DNA might represent just one example of how biological systems can detect and respond to subtle patterns and correlations that operate below the level of classical molecular interactions. If similar processes occur in neural tissue, they might contribute to the uncanny sense of connection that people sometimes report feeling with others, even across great distances or long periods of separation. This brings us to a profound question. If our genetic material can recognize similarity in other genetic patterns without physical contact, and if our brains generate quantum entangled states during conscious awareness, might the deepest bonds we form with others involve correlations that persist at both molecular and quantum levels? The love we feel for family members, the inexplicable attractions we experience towards certain individuals, the sense of recognition we sometimes feel when meeting strangers, all of these might reflect our participation in recognition systems that operate across multiple scales of biological organization. As we continue this exploration of quantum synchronicity theory, we're beginning to see how multiple levels of reality, from electromagnetic fields to molecular recognition to quantum correlations, might contribute to the mysterious phenomenon of human connection that transcends ordinary physical boundaries. The evidence we've examined suggests that consciousness, connection, and the very structure of life itself might be far stranger and more interconnected than classical science has assumed. In our next segment, we'll explore how these ideas might manifest in everyday experience and what they could mean for understanding the persistence of bonds that seem to transcend time, space, and even death itself. There's something profoundly moving about walking through an old house where love once lived. You might feel it in the way light falls through familiar windows, in the echo of footsteps that seem to remember other feet, in spaces that somehow retain the warmth of conversations that ended long ago. While science hasn't proven that emotional experiences leave measurable traces in physical spaces, there's emerging research suggesting that the boundaries between consciousness, environment, and connection might be far more fluid than we've traditionally assumed. Recent studies in environmental psychology have documented what researchers call place attachment, the deep emotional bonds people form with specific locations. But some investigations go further, exploring whether spaces might somehow retain information about the emotional states of their previous occupants. While this remains highly speculative and lacks scientific consensus, it points toward questions about how consciousness might interact with the physical world in ways we're only beginning to explore. Consider the phenomenon of thin places, locations where people across cultures report feeling a heightened sense of connection to something larger than themselves. Ancient sacred sites, natural landscapes, even certain rooms in ordinary homes seem to facilitate experiences of transcendence, peace, or profound recognition. While cultural conditioning and psychological suggestion certainly play roles in these experiences, some researchers wonder whether certain environments might create conditions that enhance whatever subtle processes underlie human connection and awareness. If consciousness does involve quantum processes, as some theories suggest, then the electromagnetic and quantum field properties of different environments might influence how these processes unfold. Certain locations might naturally generate field conditions that support coherence, clarity, or the subtle correlations that could theoretically link minds across space and time. This is speculative territory, but it offers a framework for understanding why some places seem to facilitate connection, while others feel isolating or disconnected. The architecture of connection might extend beyond physical spaces to what we might call temporal architecture, the way meaningful moments seem to create bridges across time itself. When you revisit a location where something significant happened, you often experience a kind of temporal collapse, where past and present merge in ways that feel almost mystical. The quantum mechanical concept of retrocausality, while controversial and unproven in consciousness contexts, suggests that effects might sometimes precede causes in quantum systems, hinting at temporal relationships that challenge our linear understanding of cause and effect. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics, though not scientifically established, propose that consciousness might participate in processes that transcend ordinary temporal boundaries. If true, this could provide a framework for understanding experiences where people report sensing future events, receiving guidance from deceased loved ones, or feeling connected to ancestral wisdom that seems to flow backward through time. These ideas remain far from scientific consensus and should be understood as speculative possibilities rather than established facts. Yet they point toward a vision of reality where the connections we form with others might create patterns that persist beyond the physical presence of the individuals involved, beyond the ordinary constraints of space and time. Think about the experience of inheriting objects from someone you loved. A piece of jewellery, a book with marginalia, a tool worn smooth by familiar hands. These items often carry a sense of presence that goes beyond mere sentiment or memory. While science hasn't demonstrated that objects can retain quantum information about their previous owners, the subjective experience of connection through meaningful objects suggests that our bonds with others might involve layers of reality we don't fully understand. The morphic field theory we explored earlier offers one possible framework for understanding how the patterns of relationship might persist beyond physical separation. If deep emotional bonds create morphic patterns that influence how consciousness organizes itself, then the objects, places, and practices associated with those bonds might serve as focal points for accessing those patterns. A wedding ring might not contain the consciousness of a departed spouse, but it might serve as a kind of antenna for tuning into morphic fields created by shared love and commitment. This perspective suggests that the environments we create and inhabit aren't merely passive containers for our experiences, but active participants in the architecture of connection. The way we arrange our living spaces, the objects we choose to surround ourselves with, the places where we choose to spend time, all of these might influence our capacity for subtle communion with others, whether they're physically present or not. Some meditation traditions have long recognized that certain objects, locations, and practices can facilitate states of consciousness, where the boundaries between self and other become permeable. While these experiences might be understood through psychological frameworks involving attention, memory, and suggestion, they might also reflect our participation in subtle field phenomena that connect consciousness across apparent separations. When someone you love deeply passes away, the rational mind knows they're gone, yet something else entirely continues to unfold. Dreams where they appear with startling clarity, moments when you catch their scent in impossible places, synchronicities that seem too meaningful to dismiss as coincidence. While grief psychology explains many of these experiences through the lens of memory, attachment, and the mind's struggle to process loss, some aspects of persistent connection seem to transcend conventional psychological frameworks. Consider the phenomenon that hospice workers often observe. Dying individuals frequently report visits from a deceased loved ones in their final days or hours. These encounters, dismissed by medical science as hallucinations brought on by medication or neurological changes, often provide profound comfort and seem to facilitate peaceful transitions. While brain chemistry undoubtedly influences end-of-life experiences, the consistency and meaningfulness of these reported connections across cultures suggests they might involve processes we don't fully understand. If consciousness does participate in quantum field phenomena, as some theories speculate, then the deep neural patterns created by love relationships might leave traces that persist beyond the physical death of the brain that generated them. This is highly speculative and not supported by established science, but quantum field theory does suggest that information, once created, doesn't simply disappear, but becomes integrated into the larger fabric of reality. The holographic principle in physics, while developed to understand black holes and cosmic structure, offers a metaphor for how information might be preserved in ways that transcend the specific physical systems that originally encoded it. If consciousness involves information patterns that participate in quantum field processes, then the deep love bonds that shape these patterns might create what we could think of as holographic imprints that persist in the quantum substrate of reality itself. This doesn't mean that deceased individuals continue to exist as conscious entities in any conventional sense. Rather, it suggests that the information patterns created by deep relationship might become integrated into the larger field of consciousness in ways that could theoretically influence ongoing experience. The sense of guidance, protection, or presence that many people report feeling from deceased loved ones might reflect their ongoing participation in quantum field processes that transcend individual brains and bodies. Recent research in quantum biology has revealed that quantum effects can persist in biological systems for far longer than previously thought possible. If similar principles apply to the quantum processes that might underlie consciousness, then the patterns created by deep emotional bonds could potentially maintain some form of coherence even after the neural networks that originally generated them have ceased to function. This perspective transforms how we might understand grief and healing. Rather than viewing loss as the complete severing of connection, it suggests that the deepest bonds we form might create patterns that persist in the quantum fabric of reality, potentially accessible through states of consciousness that transcend ordinary waking awareness. The comfort that many people find in meditation, prayer, or contemplative practices following loss might reflect their unconscious attunement to these persistent patterns of connection. While this remains entirely speculative and should not be mistaken for proven science, it offers a framework for understanding experiences that seem to transcend the boundaries between life and death, presence and absence, connection and separation. The love we share with others might literally reshape the quantum field of consciousness in ways that persist beyond the physical manifestation of individual minds. Some traditions speak of love as the fundamental creative force in the universe, the energy that binds particles into atoms, atoms into molecules, molecules into living systems, and living systems into the complex web of relationship that defines existence itself. While this is poetic rather than scientific language, recent discoveries about the role of information and correlation in quantum systems suggest that relationship and connection might indeed be more fundamental to reality than previously imagined. If quantum entanglement represents the basic fabric from which all physical phenomena emerge, and if consciousness participates in quantum processes, then love, understood as the deepest form of conscious connection between beings, might represent our participation in the fundamental organizing principle of reality itself. The bonds we form with others wouldn't just matter for our personal happiness or psychological well-being. They might participate in the ongoing creation and evolution of consciousness on cosmic scales. So where does this leave us here in the gentle space between sleeping and waking, between the known and that consciousness might generate quantum entangled states and the mysterious? We've journeyed through research suggesting explored theories about morphic fields that connect minds across space and time, and considered the possibility that the deepest bonds we form with others might persist in ways that transcend physical separation. None of this is proven science. Much of it remains speculative, requiring far more research before we can draw definitive conclusions. Yet the questions themselves seem to matter, opening us to possibilities that could fundamentally reshape how we understand connection, consciousness, and what it means to be human in a universe that appears far stranger and more interconnected than classical physics suggested. What might it mean to live as if these connections were real? To move through your days with the awareness that the love you feel for others might create actual patterns in the fabric of reality. To approach relationships not just as psychological experiences, but as opportunities to participate in the fundamental creative processes of the cosmos itself. This perspective doesn't require believing in any specific theory or mechanism. Rather, it invites a quality of attention that recognizes the profound mystery of consciousness and connection while remaining grounded in direct experience. When you feel an inexplicable sense of presence from someone who is physically absent, when synchronicities seem to carry meaningful messages about your relationships, when you sense invisible threads connecting you to others across space and time, you can hold these experiences with both openness and discernment. The quantum heart, we might say, is simply consciousness that recognizes its participatory relationship with the larger fabric of reality. It's awareness that holds both the personal significance of individual relationships and the cosmic context in which all connection unfolds. It's the capacity to love fully while remaining open to the mystery of how that love propagates through dimensions we can barely imagine. Living from this perspective might involve practices that cultivate coherence between heart and mind, that generate the electromagnetic and possibly quantum conditions where subtle connection becomes more probable. Simple activities like focused breathing, gratitude cultivation, or spending time in contemplative appreciation of others might do more than improve your subjective well-being. They might optimize your participation in the quantum field processes that some theories suggest underlie consciousness itself. When you hold someone in your heart with genuine appreciation, you might be doing more than generating pleasant emotions. You could be contributing to morphic fields that make love more accessible, understanding more natural, connection more probable across the entire web of human relationship. Your individual acts of care might ripple through quantum field processes that influence consciousness in ways that extend far beyond your immediate awareness. This isn't meant to burden you with cosmic responsibility or suggest that your emotions directly control reality. Rather, it's an invitation to recognize that the quality of consciousness you bring to each moment might participate in larger patterns of meaning and connection that transcend individual minds and bodies. The love you feel, the appreciation you cultivate, the moments of genuine presence you offer to others, all of these might contribute to the ongoing evolution of consciousness itself. Whether or not quantum synchronicity theory proves scientifically accurate, living as if connection transcends ordinary physical boundaries seems to generate its own rewards. People who maintain openness to subtle forms of communication with others often report richer, more meaningful relationships. Those who pay attention to synchronicities frequently find their lives filled with a sense of guidance and purpose that purely rational approaches sometimes miss. The research we've explored tonight suggests that consciousness might be far more mysterious and interconnected than mainstream science has assumed. While we await further investigation into these possibilities, we can practice what we might call quantum-informed living, approaching relationships with reverence for the invisible bonds that seem to connect us all, remaining open to forms of communication that transcend ordinary sensory channels, and cultivating the heart coherence that might optimize our participation in whatever subtle processes underlie human connection. In the end, perhaps the deepest gift of quantum synchronicity theory isn't its potential scientific accuracy, but its invitation to live with greater wonder, appreciation, and recognition of the profound mystery that surrounds every moment of conscious relationship. Whether the bonds we form with others persist through quantum entanglement, morphic resonance, or mechanisms we haven't yet discovered, the experience of connection itself remains one of the most beautiful and meaningful aspects of being human. And in that recognition, in that appreciation for the mystery of connection itself, we might find ourselves naturally aligned with whatever subtle processes create the synchronicities, the moments of presence, and the invisible threads that seem to weave through all our relationships, connecting us to each other and to the larger. This exploration of tapestry of consciousness that some call home quantum synchronicity theory invites us to consider consciousness itself as perhaps the deepest mystery we face. The possibility that our awareness might participate in quantum processes that transcend individual brains opens profound questions about the nature of observation, measurement, and reality itself. If quantum synchronicity theory has any validity, then perhaps the most profound implication isn't that we're connected to specific individuals across space and time, but that we might be participating in something far grander, an invisible architecture of meaning that permeates reality itself. This is deeply speculative territory, but it invites us to consider whether consciousness might be less like a spotlight, illuminating an external world, and more like a tuning fork that resonates with patterns already woven into the fabric of existence. Consider how meaning emerges in your daily life. You're walking down a familiar street when a particular song drifts from an open window, the same melody that played during a significant moment years ago. Suddenly, the present moment becomes layered with memory, emotion, and significance that seems to transcend the purely physical properties of sound waves hitting your eardrums. Classical neuroscience would explain this through associative memory networks, and certainly that plays a role, but what if there's more to the story? Some interpretations of consciousness research, though far from scientifically established, suggest that awareness might participate in field phenomena that extend beyond individual neural networks. If consciousness does involve quantum processes, as the myelin research we explored earlier tentatively suggests, then the patterns of meaning we create through our experiences might contribute to larger field structures that influence how significance manifests in the world. This doesn't mean that thinking positive thoughts creates positive outcomes, which remains unsupported by credible science. Rather, it points toward the possibility that consciousness might be embedded in a universe where meaning and pattern are fundamental features rather than accidental byproducts of complex chemistry. The moments when life seems to speak directly to you through synchronicity might be glimpses of this deeper order revealing itself through the interface of aware attention. Morphic resonance theory, though controversial and requiring much more scientific validation, offers one framework for understanding how patterns of meaning might propagate across time and space. If Sheldrake's ideas have any validity, then every moment of genuine recognition, every experience of profound understanding, every instance where scattered elements of life suddenly coalesce into meaningful pattern, contributes to morphic fields that make similar recognitions more probable for others. So, think about those moments when you've struggled with a question for weeks or months only to encounter exactly the book, conversation, or experience that provides the insight you needed. While chance and selective attention certainly play roles in these experiences, they often carry a quality of rightness that seems to transcend mere coincidence. You might be encountering the edges of morphic fields created by countless others who have grappled with similar questions and found similar insights. This perspective transforms how we might understand wisdom traditions, creative inspiration, and the apparent universality of certain insights across cultures and centuries. The perennial philosophy that appears in different forms across human traditions might not just reflect shared psychological structures, but could represent our collective participation in morphic fields of understanding that transcend individual minds and historical periods. When mystics throughout history describe experiences of unity consciousness, when artists report receiving inspiration from sources beyond their personal creativity, when scientists describe moments of sudden insight that seem to come from nowhere, they might be accessing morphic fields of understanding that exist in the invisible architecture of meaning itself. This remains entirely speculative, but it offers a framework for understanding experiences that seem to transcend the boundaries of individual consciousness. The implications extend to how we might approach learning, creativity, and problem solving. If morphic fields of understanding do exist, then the quality of attention we bring to questions might influence our capacity to access insights that emerge from the collective exploration of similar problems. Deep contemplation, genuine curiosity, and open-hearted inquiry might serve as tuning mechanisms that align consciousness with patterns of understanding that already exist in the field. Recent research in network science has revealed that information and insight often emerge from the connections between nodes rather than from the nodes themselves. If consciousness participates in similar network phenomena at quantum or morphic field levels, then individual minds might serve as both contributors to and receivers from a larger web of understanding that spans space and time. This doesn't diminish the importance of individual effort, study, and practice. Rather, it suggests that these activities might connect us to resources that extend far beyond personal knowledge and experience. The moments when understanding dawns, when creative solutions emerge, when life reveals patterns of meaning that had been hidden, might reflect our participation in the ongoing evolution of consciousness itself. In our hyper-connected age, where digital devices compete constantly for our awareness, the quality of attention we cultivate might be more important than we realize. If consciousness does participate in quantum field processes, as some theories suggest, then how we direct our awareness could influence not just our personal experience, but our capacity for the subtle forms of connection that quantum synchronicity theory explores. Attention, from this perspective, becomes less like a flashlight we point at objects of interest and more like a gardening practice that cultivates the conditions where meaning and connection can emerge. When you give someone your full presence, when you listen with genuine openness rather than planning your response, when you allow yourself to be touched by beauty or moved by suffering, you might be creating optimal conditions for the quantum correlations that could theoretically link conscious minds. This isn't scientifically proven, but research on attention and consciousness consistently shows that the quality of awareness we bring to experience dramatically influences what becomes possible within that experience. Mindfulness practices, which train sustained non-judgmental attention, have been shown to enhance emotional regulation, empathy, and the capacity for meaningful relationship. While these effects are understood through psychological and neurological mechanisms, they might also reflect our participation in more subtle field phenomena. Consider the difference between distracted and focused attention. When your awareness is scattered across multiple streams of information, pulled between devices, worries, and competing demands, your capacity for deep connection naturally diminishes. Not just with others, but with the subtle patterns of meaning and synchronicity that seem to require a certain quality of presence to perceive. Contemplative traditions have long recognized that attention is trainable, that the mind's natural tendency toward distraction can be gently redirected towards sustained presence. What's emerging from consciousness research is that this training might do more than improve focus and reduce stress. It might enhance our participation in whatever processes create the experiences of connection, insight, and meaningful coincidence that quantum synchronicity theory attempts to explain. When you practice giving your full attention to a single object, breath, or experience, you're not just developing concentration. You might be tuning your consciousness to frequencies of awareness that are normally drowned out by mental noise. These frequencies could theoretically resonate with similar states in other minds, creating the conditions where quantum correlations become more probable. The ecology of attention extends beyond individual practice to collective phenomena. When groups of people share focused awareness, whether in meditation, prayer, worship, or even secular activities like music or sport, they often report experiences of unity or connection that transcend individual consciousness. While group psychology explains many of these phenomena, some researchers wonder whether collective attention might create field effects that enhance whatever quantum processes underlie conscious experience. This remains highly speculative and should not be confused with proven science, but it points toward the possibility that consciousness might be inherently collaborative rather than isolated. The boundaries between minds, which seem so obvious in ordinary waking awareness, might be more like preferences than absolute barriers, permeable to influences that operate below the threshold of normal perception. Practicing what we might call quantum-informed attention doesn't require believing in any specific theory or mechanism. It simply involves cultivating presence, curiosity, and openness to the subtle dimensions of experience that emerge when awareness becomes still and spacious. Whether these dimensions involve quantum fields, morphic resonance, or purely psychological phenomena, the practice itself seems to generate its own rewards. People who develop sustained attention often report increased sensitivity to synchronicities, enhanced intuition about others' emotional states, and a greater sense of connection to the natural world. They describe feeling more permeable to beauty, more responsive to the subtle guidance that seems to emerge from paying attention to the patterns that connect seemingly separate experiences. The digital age presents unique challenges to developing this quality of attention. The constant stimulation of screens, notifications, and information streams creates what some researchers call continuous partial attention, a state where awareness remains perpetually divided and surface level. While technology itself isn't problematic, the way we typically engage with it might interfere with our capacity for the deeper forms of attention that contemplative traditions associate with wisdom and connection. Creating spaces for undivided attention becomes a practice of ecological restoration, not just for individual consciousness, but potentially for whatever field phenomena connect minds across space and time. When you choose to put away devices and give someone your complete presence, when you sit quietly and allow awareness to settle into spacious stillness, when you walk in nature with full attention to the beauty that surrounds you, you might be contributing to the health of consciousness itself. While neuroscience has made remarkable advances in mapping the brain's role in consciousness, there's growing recognition that the heart might play a far more sophisticated role in awareness and connection than previously understood. Beyond its function as a circulatory pump, the heart contains approximately 40,000 neurons, creating what some researchers call the heart brain, a complex neural network that processes information and influences conscious experience in ways we're only beginning to understand. The heart's electromagnetic field, as we explored earlier, extends several feet beyond the body and fluctuates with emotional states. But recent research suggests that this field might serve as more than just a passive indicator of internal conditions. It could function as an active communication system that influences both our own neural processing and potentially the consciousness of others in our vicinity. Heart rate variability, the subtle variations in timing between heartbeats, provides a window into the dynamic balance of our autonomic nervous system. When we experience appreciation, compassion, or genuine care for others, heart rate variability typically shifts into more coherent patterns. These patterns appear to optimize neural function, enhance emotional regulation, and improve our capacity for clear thinking and empathetic connection. What's particularly intriguing is research showing that coherent heart rhythms can influence the brain's capacity for processing information and making decisions. The heart sends more signals to the brain than it receives, suggesting that emotional states might play a more fundamental role in consciousness than cognitive neuroscience has typically assumed. If consciousness does involve quantum processes, then coherent heart states might create optimal conditions for whatever subtle correlations connect minds across space and time. This doesn't mean that positive emotions directly create quantum entanglement, which remains scientifically unproven. Rather, it suggests that the electromagnetic and possibly quantum field conditions generated by coherent heart states might enhance our sensitivity to subtle forms of information that operate below the threshold of ordinary perception. When you cultivate genuine appreciation for someone, you're not just changing your subjective emotional state, you might be optimizing the field conditions through which subtle connection becomes possible. The practice of heart coherence can be cultivated through simple techniques that anyone can learn. Focused breathing, where you breathe slowly and deeply while directing attention to the heart region, naturally shifts heart rate variability toward more coherent patterns. Adding feelings of appreciation, gratitude, or compassion amplifies these effects, creating what researchers describe as a state of psychophysiological coherence. People who practice heart coherence regularly often report enhanced intuition, improved relationships, and a greater sense of connection to others and to life itself. They describe feeling more attuned to the emotional states of those around them, more sensitive to the subtle guidance that emerges from paying attention to the heart's intelligence, and more capable of maintaining presence and compassion in challenging situations. While these effects can be understood through conventional psychology and neuroscience, they might also reflect our participation in field phenomena that extend beyond individual physiology. If morphic fields of connection do exist, then coherent heart states might serve as both contributors to and receivers from these fields, creating feedback loops that enhance the probability of meaningful connection and synchronistic experience. The laboratory of the heart, from this perspective, becomes a practice space where we can explore the subtle dimensions of consciousness and connection without needing to believe in any particular theory or mechanism. By learning to generate coherent heart states, we create optimal internal conditions for whatever processes underlie deep human bonding, intuitive knowing, and the sense of invisible guidance that many people report experiencing when they live from the heart. This practice doesn't require isolation or lengthy meditation sessions. Heart coherence can be cultivated in the midst of daily activities, during conversations with others, while walking in nature, or even in brief moments of appreciation throughout the day. The key is developing the capacity to shift into coherent states consciously, creating islands of presence and connection in the midst of our often fragmented modern lives. There's something uniquely mysterious about the way people we love appear in our dreams, sometimes bringing messages that feel far more meaningful than random neural firing patterns would suggest. While neuroscience explains dreaming through the lens of memory consolidation and neural network reorganization, some experiences seem to transcend these conventional explanations, pointing toward possibilities that quantum synchronicity theory might help us understand. Dreams occupy a unique space in consciousness research because they represent naturally occurring, altered states where the ordinary boundaries of waking awareness become permeable. During REM sleep, the brain's normal filtering mechanisms relax, potentially allowing access to information processing that operates below the threshold of conscious awareness. If consciousness does participate in quantum field phenomena, then dream states might provide optimal conditions for accessing correlations that connect minds across space and time. This remains entirely speculative and should not be confused with established science, but consider the phenomenology of certain dream experiences. You dream of someone you haven't contacted in years, only to receive an unexpected message from them the next day. A deceased loved one appears in a dream with remarkable clarity, offering guidance that proves surprisingly relevant to waking challenges. You dream of places you've never visited, later recognizing them when you encounter them in waking life. While chance, memory, and psychological processing certainly account for many of these experiences, some seem to carry a quality of information transfer that transcends what we might expect from purely internal mental phenomena. If quantum entanglement can theoretically connect particles across any distance instantaneously, and if consciousness involves quantum processes, then dream states might provide windows into correlations that operate beyond the usual constraints of space and time. The research on twins displaying synchronized brain activity, which we explored earlier, suggests that some form of information sharing might occur between closely connected individuals. If similar processes operate during sleep, when the brain's normal filtering mechanisms are relaxed, then dreams might serve as bridges for accessing information that exists in what we could metaphorically call the quantum field of connection. Morphic resonance theory, though requiring much more scientific validation, offers another framework for understanding how dream experiences might transcend individual memory and imagination. If patterns of relationship create morphic fields that persist beyond physical separation, then dream states might provide access to these fields, allowing encounters with patterns of consciousness that seem to originate beyond the dreaming mind. Many wisdom traditions have recognized dreams as spaces where ordinary boundaries become permeable, where communication with deceased loved ones becomes possible, where guidance emerges from sources that transcend individual knowledge and experience. While these traditions interpret dream experiences through spiritual rather than scientific frameworks, they point toward possibilities that quantum consciousness research might eventually help us understand. The practice of dream incubation, where people consciously request guidance or connection through dreams, has been documented across cultures and centuries. While the mechanisms remain mysterious, many individuals report receiving meaningful responses to questions posed before sleep, sometimes involving encounters with people who provide insights that exceed the dreamer's waking knowledge or understanding. If dreams do serve as quantum bridges connecting minds across space and time, then the quality of consciousness we bring to sleep might influence our capacity for these subtle forms of communication. Practices that cultivate heart coherence before sleep, intentions set with genuine care rather than mere curiosity, and the development of dream recall and lucidity might enhance whatever processes enable meaningful connection through dream states. This doesn't mean that all dreams carry messages from external sources, which would be scientifically unsupported. Rather, it suggests that some dream experiences might involve our participation in field phenomena that extend beyond individual neural networks. The key lies in developing discernment about which dream experiences carry the quality of genuine connection and which arise from the normal psychological processing that occurs during sleep. People who pay careful attention to their dream lives often report an enhanced sense of connection to others, increased sensitivity to subtle forms of guidance, and a greater appreciation for the mysterious dimensions of consciousness that emerge when waking awareness relaxes its usual boundaries. Whether these experiences involve quantum correlations, morphic field access, or purely psychological phenomena, they seem to enrich our understanding of what connection might mean in a universe where consciousness itself remains one of the deepest mysteries we face. As we near the end of our exploration, Perhaps the most profound implication of quantum synchronicity theory isn't its potential scientific validity, but its invitation to consider whether compassion might be woven into the fundamental structure of reality itself. This is deeply speculative territory that ventures far beyond established science, but it opens questions that seem worth contemplating as we seek to understand our place in a universe that appears far stranger and more interconnected than classical physics suggested. If consciousness does participate in quantum field phenomena, and if the deepest bonds we form with others create patterns that persist beyond physical separation, then perhaps what we call love isn't merely an emotion or psychological state, but our participation in the organizing principle that binds the cosmos together. Quantum entanglement reveals that separation might be less fundamental than connection, that the boundaries between particles and possibly between minds exist within a deeper unity that transcends ordinary space and time. This perspective transforms how we might understand suffering and healing, loss and recovery, isolation and connection. Rather than viewing difficult experiences as meaningless accidents in an indifferent universe, we might consider whether they serve purposes within larger patterns of meaning that extend beyond individual understanding. This doesn't minimize the reality of pain or suggest that suffering is somehow deserved, but it opens the possibility that even our most challenging experiences might contribute to the evolution of consciousness in ways we can barely glimpse. The research we've explored tonight, from quantum effects in biological systems to electromagnetic field interactions between hearts, from morphic resonance theory to the mystery of synchronistic experience, all points toward a vision of reality where consciousness and cosmos are intimately interconnected. While none of this constitutes proof of a compassionate universe, it suggests that the boundaries between self and world, individual and collective, might be far more permeable than our everyday experience suggests. Living as if compassion were fundamental to reality doesn't require believing in any particular theory or mechanism. It simply involves approaching each moment with the recognition that your consciousness might participate in larger patterns of meaning and connection that extend far beyond personal understanding. When you offer genuine presence to someone in distress, when you feel moved by beauty or touched by suffering, when you sense invisible threads connecting you to others across space and time, you might be participating in the fundamental creative processes of existence itself. This perspective invites what we might call cosmic humility, the recognition that individual consciousness exists within vast networks of relationship and meaning that transcend personal comprehension. Your thoughts, emotions, and actions don't directly control reality, which remains scientifically unsupported, but they might contribute to field phenomena that influence how consciousness manifests in the world. The practice becomes one of alignment rather than manipulation, of opening to guidance rather than attempting control, of serving patterns of meaning that emerge from the intersection of individual awareness and cosmic process. When synchronicities arise, when meaningful connections unfold, when life reveals patterns of beauty and significance that seem to transcend mere chance, you can receive these experiences as invitations to participate more fully in whatever creative intelligence appears to orchestrate the dance of consciousness and cosmos. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics, though far from scientific consensus, suggest that consciousness might play a fundamental role in the transition from quantum possibility to classical reality. If true, this would mean that awareness isn't merely observing a pre-existing world, but participating in its ongoing creation. The quality of consciousness you bring to each moment might literally influence which possibilities become actualized in the unfolding story of existence. Whether or not this proves scientifically accurate, living as if your consciousness matters to the cosmos seems to generate its own rewards. People who approach life with reverence for the mystery of awareness, who cultivate appreciation for the connections that transcend ordinary understanding, who remain open to guidance that emerges from sources beyond personal knowledge, often report lives filled with meaning, purpose, and a sense of participation in something far grander than individual existence. Here we are at what might seem like the end of our exploration, but feels more like a gentle beginning. We've journeyed through research suggesting that consciousness might generate quantum entangled states, examined theories about invisible fields that connect minds across space and time, and contemplated the possibility that the deepest bonds we form with others might persist in ways that transcend physical separation. None of this is proven science. Much remains speculative, requiring extensive research before we can draw definitive conclusions. Yet the questions themselves have opened us to possibilities that challenge everything we thought we knew about consciousness, connection, and what it means to be human in a universe that reveals new mysteries with each scientific discovery. As you return to your daily life, you carry with you not answers, but an enhanced capacity for wonder. The next time you feel an inexplicable sense of connection to someone who is physically absent, when synchronicity seems to carry meaningful messages about your relationships, when you sense invisible threads weaving through the apparent randomness of experience, you can hold these moments with both openness and discernment. The quantum heart we've explored tonight isn't a place, but a quality of awareness, consciousness that recognizes its participatory relationship with the larger mystery of existence. It's the capacity to love fully while remaining open to dimensions of connection that transcend ordinary understanding. It's attention that creates optimal conditions for whatever subtle processes link minds across the apparent boundaries of space and time. Whether quantum synchronicity theory proves scientifically valid or remains forever in the realm of speculation, it has served its purpose if it has opened you to the profound mystery of consciousness and connection that surrounds every moment of aware existence. The love you feel for others might indeed reach further than you ever imagined possible. Not through the mechanisms we've discussed tonight, but through the simple, inexplicable fact that awareness itself seems to transcend the boundaries of individual brains and bodies. In the end, perhaps the deepest truth isn't found in theories about quantum fields or morphic resonance, but in the direct experience of connection that emerges whenever we offer genuine presence to another being. The mystery doesn't need to be solved to be lived, and the connections don't need to be explained to be real. As you drift towards sleep tonight, you might find yourself wondering about the invisible architecture that seems to connect all conscious beings in webs of relationship and meaning that span the cosmos. Whether these connections operate through quantum entanglement, electromagnetic resonance, or mechanisms we haven't yet discovered, they invite our reverence, our appreciation, and our deepest recognition of the extraordinary gift of being aware in an apparently aware universe. Thank you for joining me in this contemplative exploration of quantum synchronicity theory. May you rest in the knowing that whatever separates us might be far less real than whatever connects us, and that the bonds you've formed with others might persist in dimensions of reality we're only beginning to glimpse. The mystery of consciousness continues to unfold, and with it, new questions about the nature of observation, measurement, and the role that awareness itself might play in shaping the reality we inhabit. If you found tonight's journey through the quantum aspects of connection intriguing, you might enjoy exploring an even more fundamental puzzle about the relationship between consciousness and cosmos. Check out our exploration. What if reality doesn't exist until you look at it? Where we examine how the simple act of observation might literally bring the world into being, and what this could mean for understanding your place in a universe that seems to depend on awareness for its very existence. Until we meet again in the space where science and wonder converge, may your consciousness rest in the vast mystery that connects us all, and may the quantum threads of connection carry you gently into whatever dreams await. What would it mean to live with a gentle awareness that every moment might be interconnected with vast networks of meaning we can barely comprehend? Not through any magical thinking or wishful manifestation, but through the simple recognition that consciousness itself remains one of the deepest mysteries science has yet to unravel. This isn't about controlling reality through positive thoughts, which remain scientifically unsupported, but about cultivating a quality of presence that remains open to whatever subtle dimensions of connection might unfold naturally. The practice of what we might call quantum presence doesn't require believing in any particular theory about how consciousness operates. Rather, it involves developing the capacity to hold both the personal significance of your individual experience and the cosmic context in which all awareness seems to emerge. When you sit quietly and feel the rhythm of your breath, when you notice the play of light through a window, when you sense the aliveness that animates every moment of conscious experience, you're participating in processes that science is only beginning to investigate. Recent research in contemplative neuroscience has shown that regular meditation practice creates measurable changes in brain structure and function. Areas associated with attention, emotional regulation, and self-awareness show increased grey matter density in long-term practitioners. The default mode network, which generates the constant stream of self-referential thinking that often dominates waking consciousness, becomes less active during meditative states. These changes suggest that consciousness is far more plastic and trainable than we previously understood. But perhaps more intriguingly, some meditation practitioners report experiences that seem to transcend the boundaries of individual awareness altogether. Moments where the sense of separation between observer and observed dissolves, where awareness seems to expand beyond the usual confines of personal identity, where connection to others and to existence itself feels immediate and undeniable. While these experiences might be understood through psychological frameworks involving attention and perception, they also point toward dimensions of consciousness that current neuroscience struggles to explain. The cultivation of quantum presence begins with something as simple as learning to rest in aware stillness. Not the stillness of emptiness or absence, but the vibrant stillness of pure attention that notices whatever arises without grasping or pushing away. This quality of awareness naturally creates what we might think of as optimal conditions for subtle perception, not through any mystical mechanism, but through the simple process of reducing mental noise that normally obscures more delicate aspects of experience. When your mind becomes quiet and spacious, you often begin to notice things that were always present but previously hidden beneath the constant chatter of thoughts and reactions. The subtle energy that seems to flow through your body, the way your emotional state influences the quality of light and space around you, the sense of invisible presence that sometimes accompanies moments of deep stillness. These aren't supernatural phenomena, but natural aspects of conscious experience that become accessible when awareness settles into deeper layers of perception. Some contemplative traditions describe states of consciousness where the boundaries between self and world become permeable, where individual awareness seems to merge with larger patterns of intelligence and meaning. While these descriptions often use spiritual language, they might also reflect our participation in field phenomena that extend beyond individual neural networks. This remains entirely speculative, but it suggests that the practice of cultivating presence might do more than improve personal well-being. The development of sustained attention naturally enhances what researchers call interoceptive awareness, the capacity to perceive subtle internal signals that normally remain below the threshold of consciousness. Your heartbeat becomes more noticeable, the rhythm of your breath more apparent, the flow of sensation through your body more vivid. This enhanced sensitivity to internal states often correlates with increased empathy and emotional attunement to others, suggesting that learning to feel your own aliveness more clearly might enhance your capacity for connection. People who develop stable meditative awareness often report increased synchronicity in their daily lives, not because they are attracting meaningful coincidences through mental intention, but because they've become more sensitive to the patterns of connection and meaning that seem to weave through ordinary experience. When attention becomes refined and spacious, you naturally notice relationships between events, encounters, and experiences that might have remained invisible to a more distracted or contracted awareness. In our exploration of quantum synchronicity theory, we've considered how consciousness might participate in field phenomena that connect minds across space and time. But perhaps the most immediate laboratory for investigating these possibilities lies in the simple act of deeply listening to another human being. When you offer someone your complete, undivided attention, something remarkable often unfolds that transcends ordinary communication and points toward dimensions of connection that remain mysterious to conventional psychology. Deep listening is more than just hearing words or even understanding their content. It involves creating a quality of presence that allows another person's experience to resonate within your own awareness without the usual filters of judgment, interpretation, or planning your response. When this quality of attention is established, people often report feeling truly seen and understood in ways that seem to exceed what was actually communicated through language. The neuroscience of empathy reveals that when we attentively observe another person's emotional expressions, specialized neural networks called mirror neuron systems activate in ways that literally mirror aspects of their neural activity within our own brains. This suggests that consciousness might be far more permeable and interconnected than our everyday sense of individual separation would suggest. While this operates through well-understood neurological mechanisms, it points toward the possibility that minds might naturally share information in ways that transcend purely verbal communication. But experienced listeners often describe phenomena that seem to go beyond what mirror neuron activity would predict. Moments where they seem to perceive information about another person's experience that wasn't explicitly communicated, where insights arise that appear to come from the space between minds rather than from individual thinking, where the quality of presence itself seems to facilitate healing or understanding that neither person could have generated alone. This doesn't mean that listening creates supernatural abilities or that empathy involves telepathic communication, which remains scientifically unsupported. Rather, It suggests that when consciousness becomes still and receptive, it might access dimensions of information processing that normally remain hidden beneath the noise of mental activity. The practice of deep listening might serve as a natural gateway into whatever subtle processes connect minds across the apparent boundaries of individual awareness. The development of listening presence begins with learning to notice when your attention drifts into internal commentary, planning future responses, or making judgments about what you're hearing. This isn't about eliminating these mental processes, which would be impossible, but about gently returning attention to the direct experience of receiving another person's communication without the usual layers of psychological interpretation. When listening becomes truly receptive, both the speaker and listener often report experiences that feel mutually nourishing in ways that exceed what either person brought to the interaction. New insights emerge, creative solutions appear, emotional healing unfolds, all arising from the space of shared presence, rather than from individual effort or intention. These experiences might reflect our participation in field phenomena that emerge when conscious minds create resonant conditions for subtle communication. Some therapeutic traditions have long recognized that the quality of presence a counselor brings to sessions often matters more than specific techniques or interventions. When genuine, non-judgmental attention is offered consistently, clients frequently report feeling understood and supported in ways that facilitate natural healing processes. While this operates through well-understood psychological mechanisms, it also suggests that consciousness itself might possess healing qualities that emerge when awareness becomes still and compassionate. The practice of deep listening extends beyond formal conversations to the quality of attention we bring to everyday encounters. When you listen fully to the cashier at the grocery store, when you offer complete presence to a child who wants to share their excitement, when you attend carefully to the sounds of nature during a walk, you're cultivating the same quality of receptive awareness that seems to facilitate profound connection between minds. People who develop skill in deep listening often report enhanced intuition about others' emotional states, increased sensitivity to the subtle communications that flow beneath ordinary conversation, and a greater sense of connection to the web of relationship that connects all conscious beings. Whether these abilities involve quantum field phenomena, enhanced mirror neuron activity, or purely psychological processes, they point toward capacities for connection that transcend what we normally consider possible through individual effort alone. As we've explored throughout this journey, quantum synchronicity theory suggests that consciousness might participate in patterns of connection and meaning that operate at scales both cosmic and intimate. But perhaps these patterns aren't limited to dramatic synchronicities or profound spiritual experiences. Maybe they're woven into the very fabric of ordinary life, revealing themselves through the natural geometry of attention, relationship, and conscious presence that unfolds whenever awareness becomes still enough to notice. Consider the simple act of sharing a meal with someone you care about. Two individual streams of consciousness, each carrying their own history of experience and meaning, converge around the common focus of nourishment and conversation. Something emerges from this convergence that belongs to neither person alone, a quality of connection and understanding that arises from the intersection of aware presences. This isn't mystical or supernatural, but it points toward the natural tendency of consciousness to create patterns of meaning and relationship that transcend individual boundaries. The geometry here isn't mathematical in any literal sense, but experiential. When attention becomes focused and present, it naturally creates what we might think of as sacred space, not through any religious framework, but through the simple recognition that conscious awareness itself carries a quality of inherent wholeness and intelligence that transforms whatever it touches. The meal becomes more than mere nutrition, the conversation more than information exchange, the shared presence more than the sum of two individual minds. This same pattern appears throughout human experience whenever consciousness gathers into focused, appreciative attention. A parent watching their child at play, two friends sitting in comfortable silence, a person walking mindfully through a forest. All of these situations naturally generate what contemplative traditions might call sacred geometry, the natural patterns of meaning and connection that emerge when awareness becomes present and receptive to the mystery of existence itself. Recent research in positive psychology has documented what researchers call elevation, the emotional state that arises when we witness acts of exceptional virtue, beauty, or compassion. People experiencing elevation often report feeling connected to something larger than themselves, motivated to become more generous and caring, and aware of the inherent goodness that seems to flow through conscious beings when they're operating from their deepest wisdom and compassion. While elevation operates through well-understood neurological and psychological mechanisms, the experiences themselves often feel like glimpses into dimensions of reality where meaning and connection are fundamental rather than accidental. The geometric pattern here involves the natural tendency of consciousness to recognize and resonate with whatever reflects its own deepest nature, creating feedback loops of appreciation and inspiration that seem to amplify the very qualities they recognize. This isn't to suggest that consciousness directly creates reality or that positive emotions manipulate external circumstances, which remain scientifically unsupported. Rather, it points toward the possibility that awareness naturally aligns with patterns of meaning and beauty that already exist in the world, creating experiences of recognition and resonance that feel both deeply personal and universally significant. The practice of recognizing sacred geometry in daily life doesn't require any particular belief system or spiritual framework. It simply involves developing sensitivity to the natural patterns of meaning and connection that emerge when consciousness becomes present and appreciative. The way light falls through leaves during an afternoon walk, the spontaneous laughter that arises during authentic conversation, the sense of rightness that accompanies moments of genuine generosity or compassion. All of these experiences reflect the natural tendency of awareness to create and recognize patterns of beauty and significance. People who cultivate attention to these subtle geometries of meaning often report lives that feel more connected, purposeful, and alive with possibility, not because they're creating these patterns through mental intention, but because they've learned to notice and appreciate the intricate web of relationship and meaning that seems to surround every moment of conscious experience. The sacred isn't something that needs to be added to ordinary life, but something that reveals itself naturally when awareness becomes still and receptive enough to recognize what was always already present. Throughout human history, certain insights about the nature of consciousness, connection, and reality have emerged independently across cultures, centuries, and continents. The recognition that awareness transcends individual identity, that all beings are fundamentally interconnected, that love represents a creative force that binds existence together. These understandings appear in forms as diverse as ancient philosophy, mystical poetry, and modern physics. This convergence might reflect what we could metaphorically call a river of collective wisdom that flows through human consciousness across time and space. This isn't to suggest that ideas transmit through supernatural mechanisms or that there exists some literal, collective mind storing universal truths. Rather, it points toward the possibility that consciousness itself, when it reaches certain depths of clarity and openness, naturally recognizes patterns and principles that remain consistent regardless of cultural context or historical period. The deepest insights about the nature of reality might not be cultural inventions but discoveries of what contemplative awareness reveals when it investigates its own nature thoroughly. Modern consciousness research has begun documenting what researchers call universal experiences that appear across meditative traditions, psychedelic research, and spontaneous spiritual experiences. Regardless of the specific context or trigger, people often report remarkably similar encounters with states of consciousness that feel more fundamental and real than ordinary waking awareness. These include experiences of unity, where the boundaries between self and world dissolve, encounters with what feels like unconditional love or intelligence, and recognition that individual consciousness participates in something vastly larger and more mysterious than personal identity. While these experiences might be understood through neurological frameworks involving changes in brain activity and neurotransmitter function, they also suggest that consciousness might naturally access information or awareness that transcends what individual minds could generate through personal effort alone. The consistency of these reports across cultures and centuries points toward the possibility that there are natural patterns or structures in consciousness itself that become apparent when awareness reaches sufficient depth and clarity. Some interpretations of morphic resonance theory, though requiring extensive scientific validation, suggest that insights achieved by contemplatives throughout history might contribute to fields of understanding that make similar recognitions more accessible to future seekers. This would mean that the spiritual and philosophical work done by mystics, philosophers, and wisdom teachers doesn't just benefit their immediate students, but contributes to the evolution of consciousness itself, making wisdom more available to anyone who approaches awareness with sufficient sincerity and dedication. This perspective transforms how we might understand the apparent acceleration of consciousness research and spiritual interest in recent decades. Rather than representing a purely cultural phenomenon, the growing recognition that consciousness might be far more mysterious and fundamental than materialist science assumed might reflect our collective participation in morphic fields of understanding that have been developing for centuries through the dedicated investigation of countless contemplatives and researchers. The rivered by learning to align consciousness with currents of understanding that already flow metaphor suggests that wisdom doesn't need to be created but can be accessed through the collective field of human awareness. The insights that arise during deep meditation, the creative solutions that emerge during contemplative inquiry, the moments of profound understanding that seem to come from beyond personal knowledge, all of these might reflect our participation in streams of collective wisdom that transcend individual minds while remaining accessible to individual consciousness. This doesn't diminish the importance of personal practice, study, and ethical development, which remain essential for accessing deeper dimensions of understanding. Rather, it suggests that these individual efforts connect us to resources and guidance that extend far beyond personal knowledge and experience. The contemplative path becomes less about accumulating information and more about learning to receive wisdom from sources that operate through dimensions of consciousness we're only beginning to understand. As our exploration of quantum synchronicity theory draws toward its natural conclusion, we find ourselves returning to where we began, the simple, immediate mystery of conscious awareness itself. All the theories we've examined, all the research we've considered, all the possibilities we've contemplated, ultimately point back to the most basic and profound fact of existence, that awareness is here, now, recognizing itself through these very words, through the play of understanding and mystery that consciousness enjoys when it investigates its own nature. This return to presence isn't a retreat from the complex questions we've explored, but a recognition that the deepest understanding often emerges not through accumulating more concepts, but through resting more fully in the direct experience of being aware. The quantum mysteries that fascinate physicists, the field phenomena that intrigue consciousness researchers, the synchronicities that capture our imagination, all of these arise within and are recognized by the simple fact of present moment awareness that requires no explanation to be absolutely immediate and undeniable. When you sit quietly and notice the breath moving naturally in and out of your body, when you feel the aliveness that animates this moment of experience, when you recognize the awareness that is reading these words right now, you're encountering the same consciousness that generates whatever quantum correlations might connect minds across space and time. The mystery isn't located in some distant realm of exotic physics, but is present as the very capacity for recognition that makes any experience possible at all. This recognition naturally generates what contemplative traditions call ordinary enlightenment, not a dramatic transformation into some superhuman state, but the simple appreciation for the extraordinary nature of ordinary conscious experience. The ability to see colour, to hear sound, to feel sensation, to recognize meaning, to experience connection with others. All of these represent what we might call everyday miracles that remain miraculous regardless of how thoroughly science explains their mechanisms. The practice of returning to presence becomes the foundation for whatever subtle forms of connection and communication we've explored throughout this journey. When consciousness rests in its natural state of open, receptive awareness, it creates optimal conditions for recognizing the patterns of meaning and relationship that seem to weave through all experience. Not through any special technique or esoteric knowledge, but through the simple willingness to be fully present to whatever is actually occurring in this moment. People who develop stability in present moment awareness often report that life begins to feel more alive with possibility and meaning, not because they're creating these qualities through mental effort, but because presence naturally reveals the richness and interconnectedness that was always already here. Synchronicities become more noticeable, not because they're occurring more frequently, but because awareness has become sensitive enough to recognize the subtle patterns that connect apparently separate events and experiences. The eternal return to presence also transforms how we might understand the persistence of connection beyond physical separation. Whether loved ones remain connected through quantum entanglement, morphic resonance, or mechanisms we haven't yet discovered, the recognition of their continued presence ultimately occurs within the timeless space of aware attention that exists right here, right now. The mystery doesn't need to be solved to be lived, and the connection doesn't need to be explained to be real. Perhaps the most profound gift that quantum synchronicity theory offers isn't answers about how consciousness might operate, but a deepened appreciation for the fundamental mystery that surrounds every aspect of existence. In a culture that often demands certainty and definitive explanations, remaining open to questions that may never be fully resolved requires a kind of intellectual courage that transforms how we relate to the unknown dimensions of life. Science itself has revealed that reality operates according to principles that challenge our most basic assumptions about the nature of existence. Quantum mechanics shows us a universe where particles exist in multiple states simultaneously until observation collapses them into definite properties. Relativity demonstrates that space and time are far more flexible and interconnected than everyday experience would suggest. Consciousness research reveals that awareness might be far more fundamental to reality than materialist philosophy assumed. Each of these discoveries initially seemed impossible or absurd to the scientific community, violating common sense and challenging established theories. Yet careful observation and experimentation eventually revealed that reality itself is far stranger and more wonderful than our limited conceptual frameworks could accommodate. The lesson here might be that approaching the mystery of consciousness and connection requires similar intellectual humility and openness to possibilities that exceed our current understanding. The invitation of uncertainty doesn't mean abandoning critical thinking or accepting claims without evidence. Rather, it involves holding the dynamic tension between healthy skepticism and genuine openness, between demanding scientific rigor and remaining receptive to phenomena that might operate through mechanisms we haven't yet discovered. This quality of mind naturally generates what contemplatives call beginner's mind, the freshness of perception that arises when awareness approaches each moment without the burden of already knowing what it will find. When applied to the question of human connection and the persistence of bonds beyond physical separation, this approach allows us to honour both the scientific demand for evidence and the lived experience of connection that seems to transcend ordinary explanations. We can remain appropriately cautious about claims that extend beyond current scientific consensus, while staying open to the possibility that consciousness and relationship involve dimensions of reality that remain largely unmapped by conventional research. The practice of living with uncertainty naturally develops what we might call quantum faith, not faith in any particular belief system or theory, but faith in the fundamental mystery itself. This involves trusting that reality is far more interesting and interconnected than our current understanding reveals, while remaining grounded in direct experience rather than speculative thinking. It's the faith that accompanies genuine scientific inquiry, the confidence that careful observation and open-minded investigation will continue revealing new dimensions of the extraordinary universe we inhabit. People who develop comfort with uncertainty often report that life becomes more adventurous and alive with possibility. Rather than feeling threatened by questions that lack definitive answers, they experience these mysteries as invitations to remain curious, present, and open to whatever reality might reveal through continued exploration. The unknown becomes a friend rather than an enemy, a source of wonder rather than anxiety. This quality of mind naturally enhances whatever capacity we might possess for the subtle forms of connection that quantum synchronicity theory explores. When consciousness isn't rigidly fixed on particular explanations or outcomes, it becomes more sensitive to the unexpected patterns and relationships that emerge when awareness remains spacious and receptive. The willingness to not know creates optimal conditions for recognizing whatever forms of knowing might operate through dimensions of consciousness that transcend ordinary conceptual understanding. Here we find ourselves at the gentle edge of our exploration, where the careful observations of science meet the eternal wonder that drives all genuine inquiry into the nature of existence. We've journeyed through research suggesting that consciousness might generate quantum correlations, examined theories about invisible fields that could connect minds across space and time, and contemplated possibilities that challenge everything. We thought we knew about the boundaries between individual awareness and the larger cosmos. Throughout this journey, we've maintained appropriate scientific caution, clearly labeling speculative ideas and avoiding claims that extend beyond current evidence. Yet we've also remained open to the profound mystery that surrounds consciousness itself, recognizing that the deepest questions about awareness, connection, and reality might require forms of investigation that complement but extend beyond conventional scientific methodology. What emerges from this exploration isn't a new belief system or theory to adopt, but rather an enhanced capacity for wonder that transforms how we experience the ordinary miracle of being conscious in an apparently conscious universe. Whether or not quantum synchronicity theory proves scientifically valid, it has served its purpose if it has opened you to the extraordinary mystery that surrounds every moment of aware existence. The connections you feel with others, the synchronicities that seem to carry meaning beyond coincidence, the sense of invisible threads weaving through your experience, all of these phenomena invite your attention and appreciation, regardless of the mechanisms through which they might operate. The mystery doesn't need to be solved to be lived, and the wonder doesn't need to be explained to be real. As you return to your daily life, you carry with you not answers, but an enhanced sensitivity to the subtle dimensions of connection and meaning that seem to surround all conscious experience. The next time you feel the presence of someone who is physically absent, when meaningful coincidences unfold in ways that seem too significant to ignore, when you sense that invisible intelligence seems to guide the unfolding of your life, you can hold these experiences with both appreciation and discernment. The quantum heart we've explored together represents not a place, but a quality of awareness, consciousness that remains open to whatever forms of connection and communication might operate through dimensions we're only beginning to understand. It's attention that creates optimal conditions for recognizing the patterns of meaning and relationship that seem to weave through all experience, whether these patterns involve quantum entanglement, morphic resonance, or mechanisms that remain entirely unknown. Perhaps the deepest teaching of quantum synchronicity theory is that consciousness itself might be far more mysterious, creative, and interconnected than either purely materialist science or conventional spirituality has fully appreciated. We might be living in a universe where awareness and cosmos are intimately interwoven, where individual minds participated in collective fields of meaning and understanding, where the love we feel for others reaches across space and time through channels that science is only beginning to investigate. Whether these possibilities prove accurate or remain forever in the realm of speculation, they remind us that being conscious in this universe represents an extraordinary privilege and responsibility. Every moment of awareness, every act of genuine connection, every recognition of beauty or meaning contributes to the ongoing evolution of consciousness itself, participating in patterns of creativity and relationship that extend far beyond individual understanding. The questions we have explored tonight naturally lead to an even more fundamental puzzle about the relationship between awareness and reality itself. If consciousness might participate in quantum field phenomena that connect minds across space and time, what role might observation itself play in the ongoing creation of the universe we inhabit. As we settle into this final stretch of our contemplative journey, there's something worth recognizing about the laboratory in which all of this unfolds. Not the sterile chambers where particles are entangled, or the controlled environments where consciousness research takes place, but the immediate, intimate space of your own lived experience. Every breath you take, every moment of awareness, every flash of recognition or connection represents a kind of ongoing experiment in the nature of consciousness itself. Consider this. Right now, as these words register in your awareness, billions of neurons are firing in intricate patterns. Quantum processes may be unfolding within the myelin sheaths of your brain, and electromagnetic fields are pulsing around your heart. Yet none of this complexity interferes with the simple, undeniable facts that you are here, aware, recognizing meaning through the mysterious alchemy that transforms marks on a screen into understanding. This recognition naturally generates what we might call everyday reverence, not the formal reverence of religious ritual, but the quiet appreciation that arises when consciousness recognizes its own extraordinary ordinariness. The ability to see these letters, to comprehend their meaning, to feel moved by ideas about connection and possibility, all of this represents what contemplatives throughout history have recognized as the most natural and most miraculous aspect of existence. People who develop sensitivity to this everyday miraculous quality often report that life begins to feel more vivid and alive with possibility. Not because they're creating these qualities through mental effort, but because attention has become refined enough to notice what was always already present. The play of light and shadow during an ordinary walk, the subtle emotional harmonies that arise during authentic conversation, the sense of invisible intelligence that seems to guide the unfolding of each day. All of these experiences become more apparent when consciousness learns to recognize its own creative participation in the ongoing mystery of existence. This doesn't require adopting any particular worldview or belief system. It simply involves developing what we might call contemplative sensitivity, the capacity to notice and appreciate the intricate patterns of meaning and beauty that seem to weave through all experience. Whether these patterns involve quantum fields, morphic resonance, or purely psychological processes, they consistently reward careful attention with experiences of wonder, connection, and recognition that feel both deeply personal and universally significant. The laboratory of everyday miracles also reveals how the quality of presence we bring to each moment influences what becomes possible within that moment. When consciousness becomes still and receptive, conversations deepen naturally, creative solutions emerge more readily, and the sense of connection to others and to life itself feels more immediate and accessible. This isn't because presence manipulates external circumstances, which remain scientifically unsupported, but because stillness creates optimal conditions for recognizing the subtle dimensions of relationship and meaning that surround all experience. Some meditation traditions describe what they call ordinary enlightenment, not a dramatic transformation into some extraordinary state, but the simple recognition of the extraordinary nature of ordinary conscious experience. The capacity to feel gratitude, to experience beauty, to sense connection with others, to recognize meaning in the flow of daily events. All of these represent what we might consider natural expressions of consciousness when it rests in its essential nature of open, appreciative awareness. In our culture's rush towards certainty and definitive answers, there's profound wisdom in learning to rest comfortably in the space of not knowing. This doesn't mean abandoning intellectual rigor or accepting claims without evidence, but rather cultivating the quality of mind that remains genuinely open to possibilities that exceed our current understanding, while maintaining appropriate discernment about what can and cannot be scientifically validated. The greatest scientists throughout history have often been distinguished not by their certainty about what they knew, but by their comfort with uncertainty and their willingness to remain curious about phenomena that challenged existing explanations. Einstein spent decades exploring the implications of quantum mechanics, while openly acknowledging his discomfort with its seemingly random and non-local properties. Darwin developed his theory of evolution while remaining humble about the vast gaps in understanding that his work revealed. When applied to questions about consciousness and connection, this quality of intellectual humility allows us to hold multiple possibilities simultaneously without needing to collapse them prematurely into fixed beliefs. We can appreciate the research suggesting that consciousness might involve quantum processes, while acknowledging that this remains highly speculative and requires extensive validation. We can honour the lived experience of meaningful connection that seems to transcend physical separation, while recognising that the mechanisms underlying these experiences remain largely mysterious. This approach naturally generates what contemplatives call don't know mind, the freshness of perception that arises when awareness approaches each moment without the burden of already knowing what it will encounter. Instead of filtering experience through established categories and explanations, consciousness remains open to recognizing patterns and possibilities that might not fit conventional frameworks. People who develop comfort with not knowing often report that life becomes more interesting and alive with discovery. Rather than feeling threatened by questions that lack definitive answers, they experience these mysteries as invitations to remain curious, present, and responsive to whatever reality might reveal through continued exploration. The unknown becomes a source of adventure rather than anxiety, a space of creative possibility rather than intellectual threat. This quality of mind also enhances whatever capacity we might possess for the subtle forms of connection that quantum synchronicity theory explores. When consciousness isn't rigidly attached to particular explanations or outcomes, it becomes more sensitive to the unexpected relationships and meanings that emerge when awareness remains spacious and receptive. The willingness to not know creates optimal conditions for recognizing forms of knowing that might operate through dimensions of consciousness we don't yet understand. So here we rest at the gentle close of our contemplative exploration, having journeyed through territories where established science meets the deepest mysteries of human connection. We've examined research suggesting that consciousness might generate quantum correlations, explored theories about invisible fields that could link minds across space and time, and contemplated whether the bonds we form with others might persist in ways that transcend everything we thought we knew about separation and connection. This has been a speculative journey, not proven scientific fact, yet one that opens us to possibilities that could fundamentally reshape how we understand what it means to be conscious in a universe that reveals new mysteries with each discovery. Whether quantum synchronicity theory proves valid or remains forever in the realm of speculation, perhaps its deepest gift lies not in answers but in the enhanced capacity for wonder it cultivates within us. The next time you feel that inexplicable sense of presence from someone who is physically absent, when synchronicities seem to carry messages too meaningful to dismiss, when you sense invisible threads weaving through the apparent randomness of experience, you can hold these moments with both openness and discernment. The mystery doesn't need to be solved to be lived, and the connections don't need to be explained to be real. As you return to your daily life, you carry with you the recognition that consciousness itself remains one of the deepest puzzles we face. The bonds you formed with others might indeed reach further than you ever imagined possible. Not necessarily through quantum entanglement or morphic fields, but through the simple, extraordinary fact that awareness transcends the boundaries we typically assume separate one mind from another. Thank you for joining me in this quiet exploration of the invisible architecture that might connect us all. May you rest in the knowing that whatever separates us might be far less fundamental than whatever binds us together, and may the quantum threads of possibility carry you gently into whatever dreams and discoveries await. If you found this journey through the quantum aspects of connection intriguing, I invite you to explore an even more fundamental mystery about the relationship between consciousness and reality itself. Check out What If Reality Doesn't Exist Until You Look at It, where we examine how the simple act of observation might literally participate in bringing the world into being, and what this could mean for understanding your place in a universe that seems to depend on awareness for its very existence. Until we meet again, where science and wonder converge, may your consciousness rest in the vast mystery that connects us all.